to all participants and our guest speaker. I want to use this opportunity to welcome you all for our 8th Virtual Leadership Seminar organized by Youth Impact Parliament. I would like to start this program with prayers. Let us pray. Almighty God, we humbly beseech Thee to look with favor upon this Youth Impact Parliament. Grant that it may perform its high duty as in Thy sight. Give divine guidance, clarity, insight, and eloquence to our guest speaker and host, that they may deliver and make this virtual leadership seminar memorable and resourceful to our personal development and capacity building. We commit into Thy hands all participants, that they may understand and adopt all that will be taught today. Bless the efforts of those who struggle to make this vision a living reality. Inspire and strengthen our people, that they may give time, thought, and sacrifice to speed the day of the coming beauty of this youth parliament, Volta region, and Ghana. Amen.
Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, I can see live our guest speaker, the person of Mr. Eric Nuamah Korankye. I can also see David Ampra Davis, Asim Bisa, and then myself as well, sharing screen. I want to welcome all of you for joining us. I'll proceed to the next item on our program lineup, which is the welcome address. Mr. Guest Speaker, honorable members and fellow participants, it is an honor for me to host this memorable event once again as your Speaker of Parliament. This youth organization is focused on impacting its members positively and significantly. This occasion assiduously promotes the vision of this Parliament. The topic for today's leadership seminar and the 8th edition is English Language Improvement Strategies, the role of Ghanaian language literacies. And this topic will be handled by no other person than Mr. Eric Nuamah Korankye, sub-editor and writer at Parliamentary Service of Ghana, and he is equally the writer of Before Breakfast Lessons. He is a gentleman with much knowledge on language, and he is very experienced with issues pertaining to language. I, on behalf of leadership and myself, welcome you all, most especially our guest speaker, to our 8th virtual leadership seminar. Thank you, and once again, welcome. We'll move on to introduction of guest speaker. Honorable members, Mr. Eric Nuamah Korankye, affectionately called Hamlet, is passionate about language studies and rhetorics. He earned his Masters of Science degree in English, Technical Writing and Rhetoric at Linus State University, ISU, at Bloomington-Normal, US in 2021. Before his graduate studies in US, he pursued a bachelor degree in English at the Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, Kumasi in Ghana. That was in 2009. After he has completed his secondary education at Asanteman Senior High School in Kumasi, that was also in 2008. That is per the data I have. As a graduate teaching assistant in the writing program in the Department of English at ISU, he taught composition as critical inquiry, building of his teaching assistantship experience at the Department of English, KNUST, where he assisted in courses such as communication skills, literature and English, critical ideas, research methods in English, and practical appreciation, etc. By far, he has taught the English language at almost every level, from primary school to tertiary level. And this exposure has made him much informed about the needs of students in the English language. He is enthusiastic about inspiring confidence in young people within and outside Ghana to be expressive in their native language as well as the English language, which is the most widely spoken language in the cycles of trade, media, and education in many countries. His passion about teaching and writing has birthed the Before Breakfast Lessons, which he has been broadcasting on social media since 2016. He currently works as a sub-editor in the official reports Hansa Department of the Parliamentary Service of Ghana. He is married with two beautiful children, and he is a very handsome man as well. Honorable members, I introduce to you Mr. Eric Nuamah Korankye. Mr. Eric Nuamah Korankye, I introduce to you your audience. Ladies and gentlemen, I now respectfully invite our guest speaker to take the floor and present to us on our topic for today's seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker, for this awesome introduction. In fact, it gives me more of a mountainous expectation to be able to meet the demands of the audience. I'm most grateful to you for this opportunity. I deem it really a high privilege to be amongst intellectuals, to be able to share the little knowledge that I have about the English language. So, as the Right Honorable Speaker mentioned, today we just want to look at some English language improvement strategies, how we can benefit from our literacies in our very own Ghanaian languages. So, in a couple of minutes to come, I'll be sharing my screen to take you through some of the expectations that I have for today and how we are going to go about the discussion tonight. All right. So I don't know if you can see my screen at the moment.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Give me a few minutes to navigate it. Okay, so today I want us to look at English improvement strategies, the role of Ghanaian language literacies. So about the outcomes of for today. The first one, by the end of this discussion, I'm hoping that we'll be able to acknowledge the importance of Ghanaian languages in second language acquisition. I believe all of us have a native language or a local Ghanaian language that we are native to. And so we'll be able to acknowledge the importance of Ghanaian languages in second language acquisition. Then we'll be able to also discuss the interdependence of the English language and Ghanaian language literacies, especially because we are multilinguals or bilinguals. We know more than one language. Therefore, how can we benefit from the interconnectedness of language? How do we benefit from the English language because we know our local language? And then how do we benefit from the local language because we are acquiring a second language? And then thirdly, we would want to elaborate on the strategies for improving upon English language proficiency. Interestingly, the English language is one of the languages that we've studied all our lives, from the nursery, creche, kindergarten, wherever we find ourselves in the educational level. We learn the English language. But surprisingly, it is also the language that we usually find challenges in kind of mastering it, because it is dynamic, because it is complicated, full of many rules and things to do and things not to do. Sometimes it becomes cumbersome. So these are our outcomes for tonight. I'm hoping that time will permit us to be able to go through and achieve these learning outcomes. Then the outline of the presentation is as follows. First, I would want to know some of the expectations that we have, and then I will give a little introduction and background to the kind of conversation that I would like us to have tonight. Then there are a few fun facts about language that I would be sharing. Then we'll take time to look at the English language, why it has become the most commonly used language in the world over. Then we'll look at some examples of Ghanaian language literacies that we can benefit from as bilinguals, as multilinguals. Then again, there is an obvious trilemma, because we are second language learners of the English language. We are often torn apart between whether to improve our competence in our local language or in the English language or whatever. So we would be looking at that obvious trilemma. Then, if there is time, we would also look at the interdependency of language. How can we benefit from both languages that we speak, or even if we speak more languages, how do we benefit from the interdependency of these languages? Then we will take time to look at some English improvement areas or strategies that will help us to become more proficient and competent in the use of the English language. Then we will take time to also look at the before breakfast lessons, which have been designed to help us, all language users, to be able to improve upon our competence in the English language. And then by popular demand by the right honorable speaker, I'll be taking us through the Hansard, which is the official report of Parliament, and then we'll conclude on our discussion. So without wasting much time, we'll zoom into the discussion. But I would want to hear from us right from the beginning. What are your expectations? I see Mavis, I see David, I see Wise. Are there any expectations that you have about tonight's meeting? What do you expect? When you heard about the topic, English language improvement strategies, the role of Ghanaian language literacies, what were your expectations? What do you seek to achieve at the end of this meeting?
Yes, if you want to speak, you can unmute yourself and speak on your expectations for today's program. Wise, David, Mavis.
Unless, of course, there was no expectation. Yeah, Mavis.
Thank you, Mr. Eric.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm expecting at the end of the program, as the topic says, English language improvement strategies, to be able to improve upon my English language. I love English so much, so I would want to hear what you have to give us and from there build it up. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for sharing your expectations with us. Wise, Wisdom, and David, are there any expectations that you have for tonight's meeting?
Well, if none of them are ready to speak, I would unveil my expectations. I've
Okay.
actually been looking forward to this session for a long time because it's like anytime I watch the before breakfast lessons, it unveils a lot of things that we have not even heard of. And hopefully today we'll be having a face-to-face interaction. So today's session will give me a lot of clarity on a lot of things you have shared. And then also, I myself, I enjoy the British accent a lot. However, it does not mean I try to speak like them, but I still have who I wish to speak like. Let me just unveil the first deputy speaker. I like how he speaks. If you could see, you will realize that it was obvious from my presentation.
Okay, so thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker, for sharing your expectations with us. All right, so I'll zoom in into the discussion, and if you have any questions, please keep them for me. I'll be ready to answer all your questions. And so it all begins with the importance of language. We all can attest to the fact that language is an essential commodity. All the transactions we do, the education we have, the communication between people, between nations, across cultures, across nations, everything is done with language. Therefore, it is very important that as human beings we acquire language. And so Noam Chomsky talks about the linguistic acquisition device, which is inherent in every human being. And so that is what gives us the ability to acquire or learn a language. But you would realize that this device alone does not give us the competence of a specific language, right? And so because you have that device in you, doesn't mean that you'll be able to acquire any kind of language without close contact with people in that speech community. And so language is very important. As Ghanaians, we have a lot of languages. Those we have acquired through formal learning, and those we have acquired through our environmental association with people who speak that language. So language is very important. And so now there is a debate ongoing about the use of the English language in Ghanaian homes. Typically, the Ghanaian student is not expected to speak the vernacular or local language in school, unless for class sections where we are treating Ghanaian languages. But usually with those ones, they even span for just a short time as compared to all the other time allocated for different subjects. So the Ghanaian students or pupil or student or child does not usually get the opportunity to speak their home language or their native language. And so people think that to be able to help the child acquire knowledge or to be able to improve on their academic performance in school, it is important for parents or guardians to speak English at home with their children. There are different schools of thought surrounding this topic, and many people argue that children who speak English at home usually have an added advantage over their colleagues who do not speak English at home, because they believe that once a child is proficient in language, the person is able to express him or herself and be able to understand concepts, ideas, topics, things that are shared in the classroom. And so if you are able to mentalize everything that is taught in the classroom, you'll be able to externalize it through language. And so if a child knows the English language or speaks the English language at home, it will help the child in his or her development in school. That is one side of the argument. The other side of the argument thinks that no, speaking the English language at home with a child does not add anything substantial or differently to the performance of the child in school, because at the tender age of the child, that is where the child is building his or her faculties, ability to think, to conceptualize things images, worldview, about concepts in the world. The child needs the native language at this time to be able to understand things in a more friendly way. So these are different sides of the argument. But I don't know what you also think. That is it appropriate, or is it a way to go for us to speak the English language at home with our children, or we should speak the home languages, which is our native language, with them? Whatever you think, I'm sure you'll be able to justify it. But the questions that I would like to ask is, what is the linkage between competence in the English language and academic performance? Does the fact that somebody is fluent in the English language mean that the person would perform well or excellently in academic work? Then what would account for people who are very fluent but they are very dull in academic work? Is there any direct or converse relationship between these two constructs? Is language competence even an appropriate measure of intelligence? I'm sure we've had this debate in our own quarters. People think that if somebody can speak well, the person is more intelligent than another person who may not be able to speak like that person. I'll leave you to have that debate wherever you are right now, and then we continue with our discussion. So against the background that Ghana is a former colony of Britain, and therefore we have adopted the English language as our lingua franca, Ghana is a multilingual country. There are lots of local languages and dialects in this country, at least about 84 of them. We have Frafra, Dagbani, Ewe, Gan, Chi, a whole lot of languages, local languages. But because of the colonial design, we have adopted the English language as our national language. And so because of that, the preservation, study, teaching, and promotion of local languages is jeopardizing every now and then. Now, in schools, we are running short of Ghanaian language teachers because now we are prioritizing the English language over the local languages. If you come to Accra, there are a lot of schools that do not teach Ga, but they are teaching other local languages. If you go to Ashanti region, all these things are happening because we are kind of essentializing the importance of the English language over our local language. The rhetorical conversation has been going on whether we should make any of these local languages our national language, and the discussions have been full of emotions and knowledges and asymmetric political powers and all that. But the point is, we do not have to make one Ghanaian language our national language. I believe that we can make all of them as part of our national languages. If you go to the US, they don't only speak English. They have Spanish, they have French, they have a couple of other languages. So I believe that if Ghana will be noted for the English language as well as our local languages, I believe it is a proper way that we can preserve our local languages. But I believe you also have different ways that you think you will be able to preserve our local languages. So I want to share a few fun facts about our local languages or languages in general, which you may or may not agree with me. So the first one, you typically dream speaking your native language. I don't know if that is true for all of us. If you dream, do you find yourself speaking English or your local language? A couple of times, many times, to me, I dream and I speak my native language. There is something to do with a person's native language. Then nobody is a native writer. And so nobody is born being able to write a certain language. We all learn it. It is a process. We learn to write in any kind of language. So it doesn't matter if your native language is English or Twi or Ghana or Ewe or Frafra. You don't naturally get that ability to write in that language unless you formally learn it. All right. Then acquiring knowledge in any language does not happen by magic. So if you are wishing and craving to be able to learn and acquire the English language appropriately, it takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of commitment of resources, time, energy, and everything to be able to acquire proper knowledge in the language. So invest in your reading, invest in your writing, invest in your speaking to be able to acquire proper knowledge in a language that you want to learn. Then monolinguals wish they had a second language. Sometimes we think that white people are okay that they only have the English language. No. In time to come, I'll be sharing some of the experiences I've had coming into contact with natives of the English language, or people who only have just one language. They usually wish that they had other languages. And so for us as Africans, as Ghanaians, we have that natural gifting by way of our geographical location to be able to have a native language aside the English language that we are learning. So it is a great opportunity, a natural gifting that God has given us to be bilinguals, not because of anything, but because of our birth and then our association with people around us. And so if you are a parent, you don't have to deny your child this natural opportunity. If you think that your child speaking English makes him or her super intelligent than anybody, and so you wouldn't introduce the child to a local language, you are doing a great disservice to the child, because you are denying the child the opportunity to be a bilingual. Today, we have many people who can speak English fluently, but they do not have any close connection with a native language. They'll tell you, I am an Ewe, but I can't speak Ewe. I'm an Ashanti, but I can't speak Twi. When you speak it, I can understand, but I wouldn't be able to say it. Sometimes we say all these things in our flexing mood. We think it is the way to go, or the best thing that has ever happened to us. But I bet you monolinguals, people who have only one language, would wish that they had a second language. And so if we have this natural gifting, I believe it is a very great way of taking advantage over it. And then standard English is a relative subject matter. So because we are inclined to British English, we always talk about standard British English or standard edited British English. But I want to say that there is no one standard English. There are multiple or global Englishes, and there are variations within all these so-called standard Englishes. So if you go to the US, there are variations in how they refer to certain things, how they write. There is no one standard way that they write. If you go to England or wherever they use the English language, there is no one fixed expression as the standard English. Based on geographical locations and educational backgrounds and all that, people have what they call their standard. So standard is relative. So depending on what you subscribe to. So if you subscribe to the British English, then you stick to that as your British standard English. If you subscribe to the American English, then you stick to that as your standard English, right? But it is not a blanket statement that there is only one English language, and so that is what everybody should be using. So if you are a teacher, it is important that you expose your students to these word Englishes and be able to advise them and guide them about what they would want to associate themselves with. And because we are a former British colony, we usually subscribe to the British English. And so it is important that you expose them to British English without letting them know that that is the only standard English that there is in the world, right? Okay. Then again, a person's first language is their first point of reasoning, whether consciously or unconsciously. So if you are speaking in the English language, usually you think about what you want to say in your first language before if you would translate or if you would want to convert it into the English language. So for bilinguals or multilinguals, usually we have the advantage of thinking in two different languages. But the problem comes in when we try to transpose all the structures and way of speaking in one language into the other. That is what leads to transliteration. And so because we say it in a local language, I'm not able to think about a clear example now, but most of the transliterations that we do, for example, in Akan, they say Mame Bako, Papa Bako. And so if you want to translate it into the English language, sometimes we say one mother, one father. It is understood, it is clearly understood in the English language, but there is a word, a vocabulary for one mother, one father. So you can say they are of the same parentage, right? So some of the difficulties that we usually have as second language learners or bilinguals is that we try to treat two different languages as the same, but no two languages are the same. And no language is an extension of another language. Every language has its own structures, its own rules, its own way of using the language. And so if you are speaking the English language, you know that it follows a certain structure. If you are using your local language, it also follows a certain structure. Then grammatical correctness is not inherent in native speakers. So when I was growing up, I thought that white people do not make mistakes when they speak the English language, because I thought it was their own language, therefore they have mastery over it, and so whatever they say is final. Sometimes we watch movies, they say they use certain expressions, but because it is coming from them, we accept it that it is the right way to use it. But that is not the case. Sometimes when we are speaking our own local languages, we make mistakes. And so in that same vein, when white people also speak, they can also make mistakes. So we shouldn't take whatever they say, hook, line, and sinker, right? Much as we can make mistakes in this, right? And then no native language is evil or inferior. I would want to intimate this point. No native language is evil or inferior. Sometimes we think that if we are able to speak the English language, but we are not too versed in our local language, it means we belong to a certain class of people. We are so much educated that we don't associate with the locals. But that is never true. If you are fluent in your local language and you are fluent in the English language, you are more powerful because you have strong command over two different languages. So do not let anybody deceive you that if you speak your local language, you are, I don't know how to put it, but people usually see you as inferior, and people who speak the English language proficiently as more superior. But that is never the case, because no native language is a measure of superior intelligence over the other. If I'm well versed in my local language, you cannot say that because somebody else is versed in their own English language or French or Spanish or Latin, it means the person is more intelligent than I am. No. Competence in your language comes with its own affordances and constraints. So be confident in your local language. Do not be intimidated or deceived by anybody thinking that competence in the English language is only the measure of intelligence, right? So we move to the English language. You would agree with me that now the English language is, in street term, is a hot cake, because now if you don't speak English, it's like you are missing in the world. The English language has sort of become the connecting tool that connects everybody to a certain magnetic field. So if you are not part of that field, it means you are missing out in the world. That's how the world is moving now, because if you go on Facebook, Twitter, all social media platforms, in voice talks, television, radio, everybody is speaking the English language. And so if you do not speak the English language, it feels like you are disconnected from the rest of the world, right? Much as that is what it is now, it doesn't also mean that if you don't speak the English language, you are worse off, right? I would want us to look at some of the facts about the English language, how far we have come with it, and then its importance, right? So the English language began to spread from the 5th century as a result of colonialism and migration, right? So because of colonialism of bigger countries into smaller ones, now if we colonize you, then you take our language. That's how come the English language began to spread. And because people were moving from one location to the other, the language was also spreading. So as a result of that, today the English language is the national language in most countries, in many countries, especially Ghana, right? And then a lot of people also use the English language as a second language. So the English language is the fastest growing and fastest spreading language in the world today. It is the most widely spoken language. In so many countries, even in countries with heightened usage of their local language, they still use the English language in addition. So the English language today has become very popular. In our educational context, it is the language of instruction in most schools. So from nursery, crèche, kindergarten, primary school, JHS, senior high, university, master's, doctorate, whatever level, the English language is used as the language of instruction. That is why it is important that as students or as people who like the language, it is important for us to learn the language and learn it well. If it must be done, it must be done well. Many people argue that it is not our language and therefore why is it important to learn it? You will go through some of these reasons. Now it's become the language of instruction in almost everything. If you cannot read and understand the English language, you cannot even be on Facebook, because you go on the platform and it is asking you what's on your mind, what do you want to share. If you cannot read it and understand it, you wouldn't be able to post anything, right? And so it's become a part of our community today that it becomes difficult not to use it. If we go into international trade or business or trade, commerce in the media cycle, it is the language that most people use. If you go into many offices, the English language is what many people use. If you come to Parliament, according to Standing Order 47, the English language is the language of communication, of debate. And so if a member would use a local language, that member would have to provide the interpretation or the translation of it. So wherever we find ourselves, the English language is becoming the commonly used language. Therefore, it is important for us to learn it and learn it well. Then, in the area of academia, of writing, of any kind of business, the English language has assumed certain linguistic monopoly. If you want to be a writer, you have to write in English, because most of audiences are people who read or people who understand the English language. If you use any other language, your audience is kind of limited. And today, in the kind of technocultural society that we have, it is, if you write in the English language, it reaches a larger audience than when you write in a certain local language. Right. So right now, the English language is at a peak because everybody is learning the language and everybody is using the language. So the language has become very important, and there is no going back on that. There is no way we can change what is happening now. So what we can do is, in addition to knowing and learning our local language, we can equally learn the English language as well. So it has its own social value. If you go to a village and you speak the English language, you are seen as belonging to a certain class. If you cannot speak the English language, you are seen in a certain class. And so today, even in social stratification, we try to group people as elite, people who speak the language, people who speak just the local language. And so the English language has become a way of kind of stratifying society. So it is really important that as students, our parents have been very kind to us. They have sent us to school, and we've been able to acquire the language. When I was going to school, one of the things I was told was that if you complete school, if you don't come home with anything at all, one thing that you should be able to be proud of is that you are able to speak the English language. Because I, your father or mother, I cannot speak it, but my money can buy the English language. So we are sending you to school so that you'll be able to acquire this language, right? And so we should be grateful to our parents, our guardians, that they've given us this opportunity to be able to acquire the language. Therefore, it behoves us to be able to put in our best effort to learn the language and learn it well. Most of the time, we complain about our foundations, that because probably we didn't have a good foundation, we are struggling today to be able to speak appropriately. It is true in certain lights, but I believe it is not a lost battle. Once you have the willingness, the time to be able to acquire proper knowledge in the language, you'll be able to do that. So it doesn't matter your state now, whether you're a beginner, an intermediate, or a professional, you can always improve upon yourself. Right? So these are some facts about the English language. Then I'll pause here. If there is any question, anything that you'd like to share in the meantime, before I move on. I don't want this to be a one-sided lecture. If you have any question at this point, we've been talking about English improvement strategies, and I started off with the outcomes of today's meeting, that we would acknowledge the importance of Ghanaian languages in second language acquisition. Then we said we will discuss the interdependence of the English language and Ghanaian language literacies. Then again, we said at the end of our discussion today, we'll be able to elaborate on the strategies for improving upon English language proficiency. So I run us quickly through the outline of the presentation. We said we'll be looking at some introduction and background to the topic, some fun facts, and we talked about the English language. So that is where we currently are. So if you have any questions, you can chime in. If not, I would want to move on to the next item. So now that we've known the importance of the English language, its dimensions, and the relevance in our world today, then what becomes of our Ghanaian language literacies? Should we just let them go because the English language is now the hottest commodity? No. If you lose a language, you lose a culture. You lose a very integral part of a people, right? Ideologies and cultures are embedded in people, and they are externalized through language. If you read the books of Nigerian authors, nobody will tell you that they are Nigerian authors. Just by what you see in the text, you can say that this author is a Nigerian, because they make use of their language, literacies. And by literacies, we'll be going into that pretty shortly. There are a lot of things that our country, our cultures, our people afford us that we can implement in the use of a second language, or in the use of, even if it's a third language or any other kind of language, right? So you'll be going through some of these things. But I want to emphasize that our language tells so much about our culture. The way you think, the way you perceive things, the way you see the world is usually determined by your language. That is why in our cultural setting, almost every Ghanaian would use at least one please in a person's conversation. If you are asking a question, please, how are you? It comes naturally, because that is how we have been groomed to speak. A typical European or an American wouldn't use please in that context. The person would just go straight away. How are you? I'm good. I'm fine. I'm this and that. But the Ghanaian would usually begin a question with please. Please, can I come? Please this, please that. That is a way of conceptualization, the way we are framed and programmed because of our language. In our typical culture, there is that asymmetric power relation. So it is usually an adult who asks the child how the person is doing. So even when you meet the person and you greet the person, what is expected next is for the adults rather to ask the child or the younger person how he or she is doing, and not the other way around. It is the way we have been programmed, and it is conceptualized in our language. In other cultures, it is not always like that. Anybody at all can ask the other person how the person is doing, right? And so there are essential aspects of our language that we shouldn't just let go. The more we stop using a language, it becomes extinct. there are so many languages that are going extinct because the natives of that language are not using it. They are not transferring it onto their generations because they have been immersed in a certain language that they deem is more important than their language. Right. And so if we should stop speaking any of our languages, within 5 to 10 years, all our languages will go extinct. And the moment that happens, then a part of our culture is depleted because language, culture, and thoughts are connected. You cannot separate them. So it is important for us to always hold on to our language. We can be adding more languages to it, but we shouldn't let go the one that we were born with, right? And so there are certain literacies about the language, about our local language, that I want us to pay attention to. So your local language is the basis or the foundation for your thinking faculties. So as you were young and you were being raised by your parents or your guardians, you learned to form your thoughts in your local language. So you perceive the world based on that framework of language that you were introduced to. Based on how you form your thoughts, how you see things, how you understand things, it is all based on the local language. So if you are a writer and you are writing in the English language, you have another advantage over how you use a local language. In that case, you have two different languages to be able to think in, and that should be an additional resource to you as a writer or as any user of the language. Our local languages should be deemed as resources and not a problem. I've had encounters in foreign classrooms where I made it known that I do not have to leave a part of myself, which is my local language, before I enter a classroom. And so if in the course of the discussion, there is a thought in my local language that I have to bring into the discussion, I am never shy of it, because my local language affords me the opportunity to think outside the English language, to be able to arrange my thoughts before I translate into the English language. So the local language gives you a development of your cognition, of your perception, of your worldview. You think in a certain way, right? Then I also talked about language, culture, and thought. You cannot separate these elements. The way a white child thinks is largely associated with their culture and their language. So a child in the US could say, "Shut up, daddy," and it is okay. "You are crazy, mom. You shouldn't be doing that. You can't say that to me. It's crazy. It's creepy. It's this and that and that." In our local context, you don't even have to think about it because it is inadmissible. You cannot tell your parent or your mom, your guardian, or anybody, if the person is elderly, that you are crazy. That is not how we were conditioned to think, right? And so that cultural element is present in the language. If you are speaking the local language, you think in a certain way. That is why somebody who has had an exposure on a foreign soil, the person is also easily led to use the language to suit his new environment, right? But when the person comes back and the person still wants to transport those elements into our culture, we see the person as a misfit, because you are not fitting into our cultural context. You are not fitting into our use of the language. So it is always important for us as language users to be very proud of our local language. And then if you are learning different languages, we know how to balance the thoughts, the cultures, and the ideas associated with each of these languages, right? Then there is a part of our language, whether it is Ewe, Frafra, Chi, Gan, Dagbani, all the languages that we have in Ghana. Most of them are replete with proverbs, adages, anecdotes, metaphors, imagism, symbolism. All these elements are available to us. So if somebody is speaking and the person is quoting proverbs, it makes the language sweet. You know that, wow, this person has been well groomed or trained in the local language. It tells us that, wow, this is a very wise or pithy way of speaking, right? So sometimes if a person speaks and the person uses proverbs here and there, we ask ourselves, did this person grow from a palace, or was a person raised by the grandmom or the granddad? It tells us that there is that aspect of the language which is so beautiful, but unfortunately we are losing them today. If I ask all of us to give one proverb in our local languages, it may be a problem, because we are modern day users of the language. We are not really interested in those typical, we call them typical way of using the language. But that is where the beauty of the local language is. The proverbs, the wise sayings, the metaphors that you can always have from our local setting. So I usually watch our local movies because of some of these things. I will get to hear of wonderful proverbs that are very witty, full of wisdom, full of knowledge, that when you process these proverbs, you realize that our older folks were really wise, right? If you come to the English language, they have idioms and proverbs and other maxims, axioms, and all that. We also have them in our language. So if you are skilled in both of these languages, you have an advantage. If you are, for example, if you are writing in English, and you are a writer, you are writing a story, you have the luxury of using these local languages. You have the luxury of using these proverbs in our local language in what you are writing. So, for example, it is said, or according to older folks, this and that, a water that is none of the idioms is coming to mind right now. But all the idioms that we have, all the proverbs that we have in our local languages, they can be translated into the English language. So you have an added resource to what you are writing. If you are writing a composition essay, you can use proverbs, you can use idioms, you can use adages, some of these metaphors to make your work sweet. Sometimes you write and you feel, no, this sounds like a class 1 pupil or a primary school student or a GHS student. I feel something is missing. I feel I should be able to improve it in a way. That is telling you that there are missing elements, which usually are the idioms or the vocabulary. There are those stories or the deeper way of thinking that you can incorporate into your work. So as a challenge from today, if you like, think about or search for some idioms or proverbs in your local language. Look for the English equivalent, if there are, and then try incorporating them in your writing. and see whether there wouldn't be any difference in how you write. It will give you a very appreciable and nice way of presenting your thoughts. This is a Ghanaian literacy that unfortunately we are letting go extinct because of our overdependence on the English language. But that shouldn't be so. We should be able to benefit from the literacies in our local language and be able to also benefit from that of the English language, right? Then, interlinear way of speaking. Our elders would never go straight to the point. Whatever they want to tell you, they will start sometimes from a story, from an incident that happened some time ago, from a proverb, from something. They don't just go straight to the point. So by the time they come back to the point that they were actually making, the point would even have already been made because the story captures the thought that a person wanted to communicate, right? But if you don't have the luxury of all these things, you think in a straightforward manner, you think in a linear way, like I was going to school, we decided not to come. You wouldn't have that creative imagination to be able to present your thought. The beauty of the language, whether it's a local language or the English language, is about creativity. How well are you able to create things in your mind to be able to put out in writing? Some people say that I'm not a good writer. When I'm writing, I don't know where to start from. If you start with stories, if you start with proverbs, if you start with idioms, if you start with history, a record somewhere, it foregrounds the idea that you want to share, and it gives you a starting point, right? But if you would only go about things through the linear way of thinking, every now and then your way of speaking will be just straightforward, just a narrow way. But there are broader horizons that we can actually go with our writing, with our speaking, if you take advantage of the proverbs, the adages, and all that we have about our local language, right? And then storytelling. The typical Ghanaian is a storyteller. It is one advantage that we have over most people, right? We are able to tell stories. So if you are a writer, you can take advantage of this gifting, right? The Nigerians are also great storytellers. The Achibes, the Soinkers. When you come to Ghana, the Anyidowos, the Aikwames, the Pegiopons, Kofi Awonos, all these people, even if it's a poem, they're able to tell a story with that. So it is a natural gifting that we have that we should take advantage of, right? If you lose the language, you lose the culture, you lose all the giftings and literacies that come with the language. That is why it is important for us not to overly depend on the English language at the detriment of our local languages. If you are competent in both of them, it's a plus. And I said from the beginning that based on where we were born, our geographical location, naturally we are bilinguals. We are able to speak our local language, and because of our formal education, we also acquire the English language. So if you are a parent, if you are a guardian, do not deprive your child or your ward from benefiting from this natural gift. So don't say that I am only introducing them to the English language because you think it will make them more intelligent and give them an added advantage when they go to school. Make them competent in both languages, and you see a difference. If you are skilled in your thought in your local language, translating it into the English language is not a difficulty at all. But if the English language is all that you know, and you are not able to process these thoughts well, you are limited. But somebody who can think in the local language and be able to translate it into the English language has another advantage. So don't deprive yourself or your ward, your brother, your sibling, or anybody this opportunity just because we think the English language is more important than any other language, right? And so I talked about creative translation and then socialization. So each language has its own structures. So I said from the beginning that no two languages are the same, and no language is an extension of another language. They are both different in terms of their structure, in terms of their usage. So, for example, if you take the word wash in English, the word wash, if you go to a local language, I'm using the Asante because that is the only language I'll be able to speak. So if you translate wash into tree, you would have si, horo, kohoro, tree. Right? These are different variations of the same word wash in English. So if you do not have that competence in your local language, you will translate wash as si or hohoro or horo, not considering the item that you are going to wash. So if it's a neoma, you say si neoma, but you can't say si kano, even though wash the car, but you won't say si kano, you say horokan, right? And so if you are used to your local language and you have that skill, it becomes easy for you when you have to do translations. But if you are not used to it and you overly depend on the English language, in that case, it becomes difficult translating into your local language. That is why we have a lot of transliterations in the English language today. Right, so these are some of the aspects of the Ghanaian language that we shouldn't just let go because we think using the English language makes us more superior to other people or more intelligent than other people. I have emphasized the fact that language or the ability to speak the English language is not a measure of intelligence, even though it is arguable that if you are taught something and you understand it, you should be able to communicate it. I can tell you there are a lot of people who are very intelligent, but they are not able to speak appropriately. Sometimes you would agree with yourself that the thoughts that you have, they are not always encodable in language. So some speak better than they write, or they write better than they speak. It is only a few people who are able to write much the same way as they speak. And that comes with practice. So the English language, based on the importance that we've talked about so far, has become the connecting tool in the world today on social media, across cultures, across nations, across continents. It is a way of networking everybody together. And so it is important that we learn the language, but not at the detriment of our local languages. If I should ask how many of us can write in our local languages, it may become a problem. How many of us will be able to speak our local language? That may not be a problem, but when it comes to reading the local language, it may become a problem. But imagine a white person who cannot write English. How does that sound to you? It sounds weird because we think that white people should be able to write and speak in the language. But the same happens to us. Some of us can speak our local language, but we cannot write it. Some of us can write it, but we cannot read. Some can speak, but they can't do a combination of reading, writing, and speaking. right? That is the more reason most of our local languages are going extinct. Some people are shy of their local language, but your local language is a natural gifting. It is a natural gifting that as parents, as guardians, as people, we shouldn't deprive our younger ones from having our own local language, right? Okay, so then weighing the opportunities available in being competent in the English language and being competent in our local language, then it leads us to the obvious trilemma that should we now be looking at proficiency in our native language or proficiency in the English language or whatever? Which of them should we be focusing on? Should we just focus on our local languages and then ignore the English language, or we should focus more on the English language and then forget about our native language? Especially for people who have younger ones who are caught in this trilemma, whether they should speak the English language at home with their children or whether they should speak their native language. I have intimated earlier that both of them are good depending on your choice. But the point is, don't deprive your child or your younger one the opportunity of being a bilingual. For the English language, once we go to school, you'll be able to acquire it. You'll be able to learn it, even to the highest level. If you deprive the child from learning a local language, it may come too late for the person to learn it. Because I know a couple of people who understand the local language in bits, but they cannot speak it, they cannot write it. And it will be a lot more difficult for them to go into any formal class or education system to learn Twi or Ewe or Dagbani or Ghana or any other local language. But for English, it is now possible that wherever you find yourself, you'll be able to learn the English language. So don't deny your children or anybody that you are taking care of the opportunity of acquiring a local language. It has an added advantage to them when they grow up. It gives them the opportunity to become bilinguals or people who can process thoughts in different languages. So now my question to you then is, looking at your practical language use, which of these do you use often? Do you speak your local language more than the English language? Do you write more in your local language than in the English language? Can you read your local language? And then when it comes to the English language as well, can you write proficiently in the English language? How often do you write? How often do you speak the language? How often do you read? Or can you read the English language? Acquiring proficiency in the language in terms of spoken English comes usually with environmental association. If you're often found with people who do not speak the language at all, it becomes difficult to perfect the language. So in SHS, it was quite difficult to be able to speak English fluently because most of my friends, we were just interested in the local language. Nobody is going to speak English for you to be able to also speak. And so the only time that you got to speak the English language was in the classroom. And even with that, if a teacher doesn't call you to talk, it means you're not going to speak in the English language. When you go home, it is local language throughout. So you realize that because there is limited time for you in using the English language. If you don't take care, it becomes difficult for you to speak in the English language and speak it fluently. Right? So it gets to a point where you become rusty. You find it really hard to be able to speak in the English language. And then when that happens, it inhibits your confidence. And so if you are called upon to speak in the English language, you give excuses, you run away, you shy away from taking responsibilities when it has to speaking English language in public, because you are not used to speaking the language, you're not used to practicing it. So it becomes difficult for you to speak the language. But if you are familiar with speaking the language with the people around you, if you are familiar with listening to English news or programs in English on radio, it becomes quite easier since your ears, your mouth, and everything is used to that speech community. It becomes quite easier for you to speak in that language. So if you are wondering today how or why you are not able to speak the English language appropriately, you may want to begin to think and reconsider how often you use the language. If it is once in a week or not at all, then you don't expect that you'll be able to speak it easily. I've already mentioned that the acquisition of any knowledge in the language that is not happening by magic. So you don't wake up one day and then you are speaking English. You don't wake up one day and you have so much knowledge in French when you haven't formally learned French. Unless by divine machination, that wouldn't be possible, right? It takes conscious effort to be able to learn any particular language. So do a self-assessment today in terms of your practical use of the language between your local language and the English language. Which one do you speak more? Which one do you think needs more help? Then you focus on that area and you improve upon it. Once we are students and users of the language, I think it behoves us to be able to use the language and use it appropriately. If it must be done, it must be done well. So the argument that the English language is not our native language and so we are not really interested in that, we've already talked about the fact that the English language has become indispensable. Wherever you find yourself, whether in school, even on social media, it is the English language that has become the commonest language to use. So we cannot be shelving behind that excuse that it is not our lingua franca, it is not our native language. Until such a time that as a country, Ghana, that we decide to say that the English language is no longer our our national language or our lingua franca. Until such a time, we cannot stop using the English language. Because if you find yourself in school, that is what you'll be expected to speak. At work, at your workplace, depending on the kind of work you do, that is what you'll be expected to speak. In national gatherings, that is what you are expected to hear or speak. When it comes to Parliament, that is what they are expected to use, right? And so it's become impossible to shy away from using the English language. That is why it is very important for us to find ways or strategies that will be able to use the language and use it appropriately, right? So having talked about the importance of the English language and then the importance of our local language, it is important to intimate the fact that then there is a need for language interdependency. These two languages certainly have to depend on each other, right? So if you are bilingual, if you can speak Ewe and English, how do you benefit from these two languages? These two languages can help you be a better speaker of each one of them. And they work together, not in isolation. In your mind or in your thought, these two languages are not partitioned, that half of your brain is French and half of your brain is Ewe. No. They are intertwined, they are interlaced. You cannot separate them or compartmentalize them. Everything is fused together. So as a speaker of a language, how do you benefit from these two languages? Because they depend on each other to help you become a better speaker. So there is the Linguistic Interdependence Hypothesis by Competence, 1978. He believes that your knowledge in your first language or your L1 has a way of positively transferring into the learning of your L2. So the kind of things you know in your local language, if you are learning a second language, there are some things that you can transfer. The way you think, the equivalence of words in your local language and how you can translate them into a second language. So I often get a lot of questions about what is the English version or English equivalent of this local word. So there are a lot of them that I get, but the one that I'm yet to find an appropriate English equivalent for is Nhwehwɛni. I think I've received that question about 1,000 times, but that word is so heavy and witty that there are several English translations that would have to be put together to be able to explain what Nhwehwɛni means, because it can be applied in different contexts. So in English, if you find somebody ingratiating with you because the person wants something from you, the person tries to associate with you so much that the person can get something from you. Ingratiating is an aspect of Nhwehwɛni. There are people who are flashy or who are exhibitionist. They try to show the things that they have in front of people so that the person will be well received. That is an aspect of Nhwehwɛni. If somebody is too knowing, we think the person is Nhwehwɛni. And so there are many variations of English translations that would have to be put together to be able to properly translate Nhwehwɛni. Right. And so if you are a writer or if you are a user of the language, when you have these two different cultural language contexts, you'll be able to form a better thought when you are writing or speaking. You shouldn't let this advantage go just because you want to be associated with people who speak English language. I said earlier that even in our society, there is some kind of social stratification. So people who speak English are deemed as the elites, the high-class people, and those who speak just the local language are deemed as locals. So today, people can pride themselves that, for me, I just speak the English language. I don't really understand a local language, or I can't speak a local language. And people think it is prideful to say that. But if you are a second language English learner, you'll be able to improve upon your English language acquisition process if you have a local language. And so certain local knowledge can be positively transferred in the acquisition of L2. The development of L2 partly depends on the skill level in L1. So sometimes how you are able to put your thought together in your L1 positively determines how you'll be able to acquire your L2. If you listen to those who cast news in P, I don't know if you've ever listened to them speak English before. I have so much respect for the venerable Professor Ajekum. if he's speaking the local language, it is undiluted, it is so pure, right? When this same person is speaking the English language, there is that high quality in the language. People think that people who are only conversant in the English, in the tree or the local language cannot speak English better. But I disagree. If you would listen to those who cast news in P speak English, because they often do not speak that, sometimes it becomes difficult. But when they are in the mood of speaking English, you know they use the language appropriately, correctly, because they understand the nuances in the different languages, the different structures in the different languages, and they're able to apply them quite wonderfully. All right. So don't think that speaking your local language will make you inferior or be seen as a local champion or something. No, it has an added advantage to you. So I'll share a story of one of my experiences in my writing class in the US. So most of these chaps only have the English language, so they are monolinguals. They can speak only the English language. So there was a time they asked me how many languages I speak, and then I told them in addition to the English language, I can speak the Asante and then a couple of the Akan languages. And they were so amazed that I have an advantage over them because all that they know is the English language that they have been exposed to. Some of them are trying to learn Spanish, French, and other languages. But by virtue of my birth and where I lived, I have a certain language as an advantage. So I began to engage them in some conversational words in our local language. So it is saying, "How are you?" And they tried repeating, and it was so awesome. You could see the energy, the enthusiasm, the excitement in their eyes that they knew how to ask some of these conversational words in another language. So I told them my name, and then I told them that here in Ghana, in different cultures in Ghana, the day that you are born gives you a name by default. So in Akan or in Ashanti, if you are born on Monday and you are a male born, you are called Kojo. The female version is Ajua, right? So I listed all these different names and different days on the board, but quite surprisingly, most of them, even though they knew their date of birth, they didn't know the days they were born. That is an advantage that we have. Almost everybody knows the day we were born because of the names we were given. So I gave them the opportunity to call whoever they wanted to call to ask of the days, the specific days that they were born. And then about 5 minutes time, all of them knew the days that they were born. And so through the list, we went through them, and I told them, if you were born on Thursday and you are a female born, you'll be called Jia. If you are, and then all the other names. So at the end of the class, all of them had Ghanaian names, or I should say Ashanti names, and they were so proud. I mean, there was one person who was born on a Tuesday, and I told the person that a Tuesday born who is a male is called Kwame. Sometimes we contract it as Kobe. And then a person was so happy that, oh wow, Kobe Bryant. It was at that time that he had passed on, and so it was very fresh in our mind. And he was so excited that he could be called Kobe or Kobe in another culture. And so I believe that monolinguals or white people do not resist different languages. They just do not have the opportunity to learn them. So if we, by virtue of our birth, by virtue of our geographical locations, we have that advantage, that opportunity to learn or to have a second language, we shouldn't deny ourselves, or we shouldn't deny our younger ones that opportunity, right? Now, in most writing programs, they are moving towards translingualism, that you'll be able to impute your own home languages into the writing. So if you read works by Kofi Awono, he makes use of words and content and issues from the Everland. So Jobeselisa has treated me thus in Songs of Sorrow. He makes use of these cultural elements in the work, and it is acceptable. If you read Chinua Achebe's work, nobody will tell you that this person is a Nigerian author, because he makes use of their language, their ways of thinking, their literacies. He isn't shy of them. Wole Soyinka is no exception. Leopold Sedar Senghor. These people try to incorporate their local languages into the words or their writing. If you are writing on social media, there is no law that bans you from mixing your language. So with Twi and English, whatever English, sometimes we think that our audience wouldn't be able to understand, but a serious audience or whoever is interested in what you are sharing will be really interested in knowing what that particular word or the other word, the value word that you use means. So we are gradually moving towards that direction. We should brace ourselves that there is no going back on the fact that the English language has almost become indispensable. But in the face of that, we shouldn't let our own languages go extinct. So how do we incorporate both of them in our writings, in our speaking, in whatever we do? We have to agree and accept the fact that our language is not inferior to the English language. And so we can also incorporate them in our discussions, in the things that we talk about, right? So these are some of the language interdependency hypotheses that I wanted to share. The fact that your L1, which is your native language, has a way of influencing your L2, the English language that you're acquiring. There are people who can speak multiple languages. The president can speak about 7 or 6 languages. Don't you find it beautiful when he's giving a State of the Nation address or any kind of address and is able to switch from one language to the other? Sometimes I really wish I could do that, but I don't have that luxury. But you have a luxury of the English language and at least one local language. Don't let that local language go in vain. Don't lose it. So in how you write, in how you speak, don't lose it. It is a way of giving you an added advantage. Right. So now, when it comes to English language improvement areas, there are no hard and fast rules, as in these are the ways of improving your English language, because language acquisition, language improvement are individually based. The way one person will learn a language is different from another person. So I cannot give you the panacea that this is how to do it. Somebody will use that principle and it wouldn't work for the person. Another person would use it and the person will benefit from it. So what I can do is to look at areas where you need to improve, and then you devise means and strategies that would help you be able to achieve those goals or objectives that you have about the English language. So the first thing that I would want to talk about is the vocabulary. Now, vocabulary has to do with a set of words that you use to express a thought. If you have a limited vocabulary, you can't express much thought. Sometimes you have a thought in your mind, but you don't have the appropriate vocabulary to encode your thought in. So you become limited. You are asked a question in class, you understand in your head, but how to put words together to be able to communicate your thought usually is a problem. So then how do you expand your vocabulary? You need to read. Reading cannot be overemphasized. By you reading different genres, be it poems or novels or prose, any article at all, you get to see how writers express their thoughts. So based on how they express their thoughts, you can learn those words. You can learn those sentence constructions. You read a book and how this person expresses thoughts is so beautiful. So you underline it or you copy it somewhere and then you use it. There's a difference between identifying a new vocabulary and using it. Once you identify the vocabulary, at least use it one or twice. It is a way of the vocabulary sticking into your mind. Otherwise, you won't remember it. So what I usually do is, if I find a new word which is beautiful to me and I would like to use it, I'll create a Facebook post and then I'll use that word in it. I'll never forget it because I've used it before and then it sticks. Better than just admiring the word somewhere and then letting it go. If it is a beautiful phrase or sentence that I saw somewhere that is so appealing to me, I try to use it. Then repeatedly, it becomes part of your vocabulary. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to expand your vocabulary. So reading. Read anything readable based on your beliefs and your principles, right? But what I'm encouraging is for you to develop the habit of reading. It could be graphic, it could be newspapers, it could be any genre of writing. It is a way of expanding your vocabulary, right? Read from good authors where you learn how they communicate their thoughts, how they describe things. Sometimes when you read foreign books, you are amazed at how they are able to describe very little things with a lot of details. It's just as we also can describe so many things in our local language with a lot of details, right? You can't simply say atare no efe or the dress is nice, but if you read from some authors, they can describe how the shirt or the dress was sewn, how it is laced with different colors. All these are ways of expanding your vocabulary. So if you read a novel and the author was describing a scene, sometimes you picture yourself in that scene. That is the power of words. Words are able to paint pictures. So in our quest to improve upon our English language competence, it is important for us to know or expand on our vocabulary, know how different items are called, how different scenes or events are described, knowing the appropriate collocations, so you know that some words move with others, right? So you can't establish a goal in terms of scoring a goal. You can't establish it, but you can score a goal. So in that context, score collocates with goal. But if we are talking about setting up goals for ourselves, you cannot also say you are scoring a goal, right? So different contexts call for different words, different collocation of words. So as you improve upon your vocabulary, you begin to have the appropriate words to describe appropriate situations or conditions. Right. So one way for you to do that is to develop the habit of reading. Read, read, read. It doesn't have to be complex books or something. Just any readable material that is capable of improving upon your vocabulary will be good. Then pronunciation of words. To be able to communicate in the English language, you should know how to pronounce words. Then it brings in the issue of accent, your sound, how you sound, and then your voice. Some people are not confident in their voices. They feel they don't sound too good, so they don't like to speak. Every individual is different. You are uniquely made. So don't be shy of how you sound. If you would want to improve upon it, fine. But to say you're not going to speak because of how you sound is a great disadvantage, or it's not a way of showing appreciation to God or whoever you believe in. So work on how you pronounce words, how you put words together, right? So as a practice, you can be recording yourself and then listen to how you sound, and then have ways of improving upon it, so that when you hear yourself speak, you'll be confident about it, right? We all speak differently, and it is unique. One person's way of speaking is not superior to another person, but it could be admirable. So if you find a mentor or a role model that you would want to sound like, that is a way to go. But you don't have to be immersed in another person's shadow, right? Be confident in who you are, believe in yourself, believe in how you sound, believe the fact that you are unique, and therefore how you speak is also unique. It's our idiolect. That is why you can hear somebody speak from afar and you can tell that it is this person speaking. That's our idiolect. Everybody speaks in a unique way. If you're not confident in yours and you want to mimic another person, that is your case. We all have role models that we would want to sound like, but it doesn't mean we want to be those people. We want to copy some things from them, but we don't want to be them. All right. So work in how you pronounce words, how you sound, how your voices. And then grammar. We can't overemphasize the importance of grammar, because grammar is a set of rules that govern the use of the language. So you cannot be saying they is or you is. You know, the rule of the language doesn't permit that. So if you want to really improve upon your language, then you need to know how to use or to obey the rules of grammar. So as a way, you can find a small pocket-sized grammar book, usually the ones focusing on subject-verb agreement. So they are, she is, they were. These are the foundational aspects of the language. Once you get the subject-verb agreement right, the rest is bonus. You can just build upon it. But if that foundation is very weak, it doesn't matter what you build on it. The whole structure becomes weak. So find a small grammar book, invest in it. Buy a small grammar book that has the rules. Today we have the internet. You can search for whatever you want on the internet. So search for simple grammar rules to follow them. It will give you that confidence to be able to speak English. Because if you are speaking and you are making those grammatical mistakes, people are likely to laugh at you. And then when they do, it demoralizes you. You are not confident anymore to speak. So please, even on your phone, you can get a grammar app that focuses mainly on these tenses, sentence construction, subject-verb agreement, pronoun agreement, and all that. These are little things that would help you be able to become confident in your use of the language. Then we come to mechanics, the spelling, punctuation, capitalization. These are essential parts of the language. If you don't know how to use commas, it makes your writing difficult to read. It makes it difficult to get the understanding that you want. Today, with the influx of social media and all these social media language, people do not pay attention to appropriate spelling because we are using the shortcut, the shorthand, and so we don't know how to spell words. If it were not autocorrect on our phones, most of us wouldn't be able to spell so many words. And that is where we have got to. Sometimes you read essays from pupils and you realize they are using shorthand even in formal essays. How did we get there? So to help myself, I decided to write words in full so that there was a day that I wrote one exam and I was going through my essay before I submit. And I realized I used you instead of Y-O-U. I just used the letter U. And I realized that if this had gone to the teacher, probably some marks would have been deducted from my full marks. So I decided to now use words up fully. It doesn't matter where I'm using them, right? There are different schools of thought on that. Some people are able to use these shorthand in informal conversations, and when it comes to formal, they're able to write their words in full. I don't have any problem with that. That is a good choice. But for me, in order to save myself, I try to write words in full because some of these things form in our subconscious. Before you know it, you've written it and sent it. So as a way of guarding yourself, develop the strategy that works best for you and then go by it. Then the language, the beauty of the language is not only in the language aspect, as in the grammar, the rules and all that. The aspect of literature also makes the language so beautiful. So you don't have to be a literature student to know literature or to use literature or to make your work beautiful. Sometimes we have this perception that it is only for general arts students or students who read literature. I know of great writers who are scientists, agriculturists, people who are not into the arts or the humanities and all that. So on your own, you can search for literary devices, the metaphors, the alliterations, the symbolisms, the similes and all that, and look at the various examples they give. And then you also try to use them in your language. For example, you read about metaphors and they are talking about direct comparisons between two items. So the wise is a lion in a ring, talking about how fierce the wise is, right? And so if you're able to use this in your language, it makes it kind of sweet, polished, some kind of sophisticated, right? Than just the ordinary use of the language that wise is strong. I mean, it's normal. There's nothing extraordinary about it. But wise is a powerhouse, just like a lion. It sets the mind to think about, a lion. What qualities does a lion have that I'm comparing it to wise, right? It opens up the imagination, the way you think, the way you even communicate. So as an assignment to you on your own, just Google literary devices. There are thousands of them that you can get on the internet. Then look at their explanations and the examples they give. You can learn so many of them, and you'll be able to incorporate them in the way you speak and the way you write. It is a very good way of improving upon your English language. And so these are ways of improving your English language: organization and flow of thought, critical thinking, reading and writing, written versus spoken language, error finding strategies, and all that. These are wonderful ways of improving upon your English language. As I said, acquiring any knowledge in any language does not happen by magic. It takes a lot of hard work, a lot of time, resources to be able to improve upon your knowledge in any kind of language. So that will be that for the aspect of English language improvement. Then when I looked at all these areas in the English language and how we as second language learners, we need help to be able to improve upon these things. That is why I designed the concept of the before breakfast lessons. These are lessons that I used to send daily from Mondays to Fridays, each day in the course of the week. That these lessons comprised confusing words or misused words, then idioms or useful words, grammar and mechanics, and then vocabulary building, communication tips, writing and speaking. So these were areas that I felt that I could also help people to be able to get knowledge outside the classroom. And with time, it's been amazing. The feedback from people has been wonderful, that it's helping them in their daily life. So now it's moved from a daily publication to 3 days in a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and then Fridays. So I touch on bits and pieces of communications that we are used to in the country. So on our radio, on TV, in our classrooms, all the misused words that we usually come across in the day. These are some of the things that I put together in the lessons. Some idioms that will spice up your language, that will make your language sweet to hear, kind of sophisticated. And then some grammar rules, I try to break them simply for everybody to understand. Some people do not like grammar because of how technical it is. But in the lessons, I try to minimize on the technical terms and the jargons and all that. And then I try to break it down for everybody to understand. And then when it comes to the vocabulary building, I try to find words that are really common. Some activities, things that we usually do, but we do not have the appropriate words to describe them. Sometimes, if you have a bottle which contains oil which has congealed, and you want the congealed oil to flow down so that you can pour it into a different item, or we know the process, we know the activity, but we do not know the name of that activity we do by leaning the bottle by a wall or any structure so that the remaining oil can drain down, right? So I got to know that the word for that action is called Dalfifi, right? So in the lessons, I try to bring in some of these common things that we do that we do not have the appropriate words to describe them, so that you'll be able to improve upon your vocabulary. And then there is another aspect of it, which is about the writing and editing services that I offer. So if you want to write a book, if you want to edit your work, if you want to write your project work, if you want to write your proposal or anything, I offer professional services which go for some fee, but it is really affordable. So if you have any work that you want to to seek professional help with regard to writing or editing, our doors are always open for you to share them. Right. Then I'm bringing the presentation to an end, but the Right Honorable Speaker here made a request about how the Hansard is produced. Since this is a youth in Parliament platform, I would want to quickly go through the process, and then I open up for any questions or contributions. So the Hansard, which is also called the official report, is the official record of parliamentary debate. So the members of Parliament go into the chamber, and then they make their debate. But for record's sake, they don't just go there and then make the debate without the debate being recorded. So there is a team, part of the parliamentary service, that supports or aids in the record of these proceedings. So the department that is responsible for producing the transcript or the record of the debate that they have on the floor is the Hansard Department, or Department of Official Reports. So this department is in charge of documenting all the happenings on the floor. So whenever you take the Hansard, this is a copy of the Hansard. It comes in this format. So whenever you take a copy, it contains the proceedings of that day's activities. Right. So if you come within the department, there are different stages that the Hansard goes through before it is published into that format that I just showed you. So we have the reporters, we have sub-editors, we have deputy editors, we have typesetters, proofreaders, and then finally the editor of debate. So the work flows in that linear order. So the reporters go into the chamber, they record, they have IC recorders, and this time there is a software that they use in recording the debate. So they record these audios, and then they get to their office, they listen to the audio, and then they transcribe, they type them. So different reporters go in at different time intervals. So let's say the sitting starts at 10 o'clock. One reporter will go in there and then record for 10 minutes. So by 10:10, the first recorder is done. When this reporter is done recording for the first 10 minutes, he leaves the chamber, comes to the office, and begin typing. Then another reporter will take it from 10:10 to 10:20. So they go in 10-minute takes. So depending on how long they sit for the day, different reporters would have to go at different time rotations, right? So when they are done with recording the audios and typing them, they send the transcripts that they have typed to the sub-editors, who are the second in the chain. So the sub-editors would listen to the audio and then compare it to the transcript, the text that they have typed, and compare it to what they heard, whether what the members said on the floor have been communicated well in the text, or if there are any mistakes, then they correct them in terms of grammar, in terms of mishearings, in terms of procedure. The sub-editors take care of those things. And then from the sub-editors, it moves to the deputy editors. These editors review what the sub-editors have done. So if there were any missed corrections that they should have done, the deputy editors would address those issues. If there were any procedures that were missed, the deputy editors would take care of those. Then it moves from the deputy editors to the typesetters. So you realize that we don't print the Hansard in the A4 version like this. It comes in this format, just like a book. So the typesetters would convert the transcript from this format into this book. So they set it out in different columns. They set it out in different columns, right? So they arrange them in these different columns. So that is the work of the typesetters. Then from them, it goes to the proofreaders who make sure that the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, the punctuation signs, everything is put in place to make sure the document is tidy, right? Then from the proofreaders, then it eventually comes to the editor of debate, who is the head of the department. And then he makes sure that he reviews all the work that they have done to make sure it is publishable, to make sure no omissions are made, to make sure it conforms to the procedures of Parliament, right? And then after that, he authorizes it for it to be printed so that we get it in this format, and it is sent to honorable members on the floor for correction and adoption. So the speaker would usually call it is time to correct the vote and proceedings in the official report or the Hansard. So if there are no corrections from honorable members, then it is adopted as the true record of the proceedings. So basically, that is the work of the official report department. They produce the official record of the parliamentary proceedings. So in conclusion to all that we have discussed, I would say that competence in language depends on individual differences in language learning abilities. So a second language works well in tandem with a first language, not in isolation. So you shouldn't let go your local language because you want to learn the English language. Both of them can always work side by side. Right. So thank you very much for your time and everything. So if you have any questions, I'm ready for that. Thank you for attention.
Wow. This is such a very loaded presentation. I'm marveled. And then, sorry, you have done so well, sir. You have done so well. I'm happy you have given you adequate time and you're just flowing. You're just flowing like you have been rehearsing it for a long time. And this does confirm that indeed you have been teaching English for over a long time and at various levels, because you are proving that it is part and parcel of you in how you are just flowing and teaching it. I must say, I'm very grateful that I have you on board. Not that I'm giving my remarks, but from your presentation, you have reminded us not to walk away from our culture and our local dialects. Thank you so much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, the brilliant presentation has ended, and we have made provision for questions and answers. So if you have a question pertaining to what has been presented, you can kindly indicate it in the in-call message, or you can unmute yourself and I'll call you to ask your question. So, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is now open for your questions on this brilliant presentation by Mr. Eric Nuamah Korankye. The floor is now open. Okay, Mavis has typed. Mavis typed something there. Oh, Mavis, you can unmute yourself and speak. you can unmute yourself and speak. Yes, Mavis, you can unmute yourself and speak.
No, I have no questions.
Okay. Mavis typed that she's enlightened by the presentation and thanks you and applauds you for your brilliant presentation. Bertie Divine Wise, do you have any question? Or if you don't have any question, I have a question. Mr. Eric, you are an expert in language as well, and from your presentation, you have encouraged us to, if possible, learn and better our local dialects. Some people are able to learn different local languages, and then if you can see, I don't know whether you have noticed, but I'm sure you have, the languages all have their mechanics, literacies, and then all those. The way the tongue operates in order for you to properly communicate is different from each language. The way the French would speak their French, when they want to speak English, it appears because of how they speak it, the tongue would not allow them to freely speak the English fluently. When it comes to Ewe, the way we speak the Ewe, we really use the tongue so much. So due to that, the intonations, just the change of intonation can change the meaning. And due to that, it appears you are unable, or we have not really accepted the fact that we can easily learn languages that have varying ways with which the tongue and the intonations all come into play in order for you to fluently learn these languages. What are your advices with respect to learning of new languages? And then maybe if you want to tune our minds for us to, learn other languages, I just want you to speak on learning languages, if you have something on that.
Okay, so yeah, thank you very much for the question. It is something that I have observed, and it has happened to me a couple of times. I can't shy away from my local language. Sometimes it comes to play in the way I speak. So we often have this, I don't know if I should call it joke or a way of teasing different cultures that we are not able to pronounce certain words. So when it comes to speaking the English language, those defects in the local language actually translate into the learning of the English language. All these are normal. It happens to everybody who's learning a second language. So originality is very key. If a French person is speaking English language, it shows. You cannot run away from it, because the formative years of any person is usually done with that local language. And so you cannot really change the way you sound. But I see a lot of people who try to speak like white people when they are speaking the English language. But all these are different ways of using the language. You're ever showing up in the way you speak the English language is not a defect. It only tells that you are communicating in a different language, and your first language has that influence in any kind of language that you acquire. From the language interdependency hypothesis that we talked about, L2 cannot be separated from L1, because it is upon your knowledge in the L1 that you are building the L2. So if a typical Fafra person is speaking English, it shows. There's no running away from it. If an Ashanti is speaking English, if you are somebody who knows languages, you'll be able to even tell that this person comes from this region. Accent and intonation are allowed and admissible in any kind of language. Akan is a tonal language, and so if you are transferring that your accent, the way you sound, into the English language, there's nothing wrong with that, and there's no running away from it. So don't be discouraged in how you sound when you're speaking the English language. If a white person is speaking, let's say, French, the person won't sound like an English. It takes time. If a typical white person learns how to speak English, unless, of course, the person stays with the people for a very long time before the person can begin to sound like those people. Other than that, the person's white tendencies always show up in the new language that the person is learning. So that shouldn't be a discouraging factor at all, because, as I said, languages are not partitioned in our heads that if I want to speak Twi, then I'm going to sound like Twi. If I'm going to speak like an Ewe, then I'm going to sound like an Ewe. If I'm going to speak English, then I'm going to... No, it is not compartmentalized in our brains. Everything is mixed up together. So your tone, your accent, the way you pronounce words, you can't shy away from it. And then it is part of language learning.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much. We'll try and adapt as well. The Ghanaian language, although I can't speak Ga, I really like how they speak the Ga. It's quite, let me say, authoritative. They sound quite authoritative when they are speaking. Yeah, so I'll do my best, but let me finish up with the English first. Let me say a request to our guest speaker. Okay, question time. Divine has a question. Divine, kindly unmute yourself and ask your question. Kindly unmute yourself and ask your question, please. Hello, Mr. Divine Bedra.
Yeah, hello, good evening.
Yes.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I would like to ask, there are some people who are timid and find it difficult to stand in front of people and communicate. What advice or what recommendations will you give for those people to improve their communication? Or be able to channel that fear or something to communicate effectively? Thank you very much.
Okay, so Divine, thank you very much for your question. It is a very germane question. A lot of people have that fear. What I would say is that fear is not a bad thing, because it tells us that we can differentiate between danger and comfort. Like, if you don't fear anything, then it becomes a problem. But if fear becomes too problematic that it deters you from doing some things like speaking in front of people, then it must be remedied, right? So oftentimes people who fear to stand in front of people do not want to accept the fact that they are competent enough to stand in front of people. So they always think that other people can do it and not them. So they would find every excuse to give in order to shy away from standing in front of people. The moment you carry on that thought and have that outlook, you can't overcome it. It always takes one bold step to be able to accept the first challenge, the first day challenge, to be able to do it, to break the ice. On your first day, you are going to be laughed at. You are going to shake. Your voice will be shrieking as if you are crying. you wish that you can disappear, but you need that experience. It is going to embolden you later on. So for people who are shy and have that fear of standing in front of people, they have to begin to take advantage of the smaller opportunities. So for example, between two friends, now I'm going to rehearse with 2 people, then it goes to 3 people, then you are gradually building your confidence. You may not be able to stand in front of 1,000 people from the beginning, but it has to begin from somewhere. So you take advantage of the little opportunities that you have. If it's in church or at your mosque or wherever you find yourself, small opportunities to pray for us, to sing, to invite a guest speaker, to do those small opportunities will give you the confidence to be able to stand in front of a larger audience. But sometimes we don't take advantage of those opportunities and think that we can just at a go stand in front of 1,000 people to be able to talk. No, it starts from somewhere. It starts from a little process. If you are timid, it has a lot to tell about your upbringing. Probably you are not often given the opportunity to express yourself. And so because of that, you have developed that coiling attitude to be in your one corner, and then you don't want to associate with people. I used to have that problem because I didn't want to be heard amongst people. I didn't want attention to be on me, that everybody would be listening to me. I didn't like that idea at all. And so I always shied away from any opportunity to talk in front of people. But I realized that as time is going, and then you will still hold on to that fear. That fear would continue to be there, and it will deprive you from a lot of opportunities. So it is important for you to take advantage of the little opportunities. And then I think somebody's microphone echoes. So that when you are given a larger platform to talk, you'll be able to do it. So learn to improve yourself. If you are knowledgeable, you become confident. Learn to improve upon your speaking skills. It gives you some confidence. Learn to interact with people. If you are antisocial, it becomes difficult for you to stand in front of people. But if you develop that skill, I believe with time you'll be able to overcome it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Guest Speaker. Wise typed a question. I would like him to read out his question so that the guest speaker can accordingly answer. Thank you. Yes, Wise, kindly unmute yourself before you ask your question. I think he's having some network issues. Or he typed his question, so if he's having network issue, I would proceed to read his question. Why Sabla, he typed a minute ago that with regards to the obvious effects of the usage of shorthands in writing, will it be wrong not to entertain that from those we communicate with, especially online social media platforms? Would that amount to being rude to some extent, or it is a step in the right direction? Thank you.
Okay. I think this is a very good question. I've had a couple of experiences where I've had to ask people to expand on some of the shorthands that they use. So you are chatting with somebody and the person writes TTYL, BTW, like I have to be decoding what all these things mean. But you would realize that different communication environment, different people have different ways of using these shorthands. And so I wouldn't be able to interpret all that you mean for the conversation to continue. So I would ask you that you write words in full so that I can understand what you mean. It depends on how you say it, but other than that, it is not a rude remark, because I think for the communication to go on, both the speaker and the listener must understand the language being used. So if I don't understand the TTYL, there's no way I would understand to contribute to the conversation. So just write words in full. It will help you, it will help me, so that we don't go the back and forth with what's the meaning of BTW, what's the meaning of ASAP. Of course, with time, some of them have become normal and we all understand it, but you wouldn't know whether your interlocutor understands the meaning of that shorthand. So I always advise that it is important for you to write the words in full. I don't know how OK is different from KK in terms of time, in terms of whatever, but I don't know, that KK really puts me off. It's one of my pet peeves. If you have time to write K and K, why can't you write O and K? Right. So there are so many things we have copied blindly, and it's subconsciously leading into the way we even use the formal language. Sometimes these things trip in without us knowing. So wise, it wouldn't be bad for you to tell the person that the person should write in full. It depends on how you say it. Of course, the language comes with politeness and all that. So if you ask it in a polite way, I don't think it's a problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Guest Speaker. Our guest speaker has been speaking for a long while, and we wouldn't like to keep him for a very long time after presenting to us a very detailed presentation. However, before his closing remarks, I'd like to put a request to him. I've been following Before Breakfast lessons for a long time now, and I'm someone who is one of his fans. That is a very good thing that he does. Mr. Eric, on behalf of myself and all your followers, I want to say a big thank you to you, and forgot to encourage you to keep on doing the good work that you are doing. However, my request is that I think not only we that have the opportunity and privilege to be using social media platforms should enjoy from this. I would like to put a request to you that if you could gather as much as 365 of them and publish it as a book, so that each day, each one can be designated to a day in a year, that it could be published and then possibly be recommended to basic schools, second cycle schools, and even tertiary, and even the workers, and then all those. At least you need to have just a book. It can be as big as the Constitution of Ghana, or maybe one Hansard, at least a day. Try and read one, because it contains a lot, and then I'm very sure anyone who would have that book and every day he follows and read one in the morning, like it would be an English Bible for you, I'm very sure they'll gain more exposure, and then they will also improve. So I want to put that request to you to consider publishing Before Breakfast lessons, 365 of them into one book, of which one is designated to a day, for the parts of the world who are not privileged to follow you on social media to also have a bite of that cake. That is my request to you. Thank you very much.
All right, so thank you for your kind words. I really appreciate them. It's always good to have good feedback from what you do, and I really appreciate it so much. Regarding your your request. Work has already been put into it, and the manuscript for it is almost ready, and I'm working hard to get it published, except for the fact that 365 lessons cannot be in one book. Even the current 60 that I have, publishers are telling me it will be too voluminous to carry around, and so I would have to limit it to a few lessons, just that so that it will be portable for people to carry around. So work is being done around it, and I'm hoping that this year you would have copies of before breakfast lessons. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, our guest speaker. At this juncture, I'd like to invite our guest speaker to give his closing remarks as we approach the end of today's seminar. Mr. Eric, the floor is yours.
All right, so I'm so much grateful to the entire team. Wisdom, did you want to say something?
Oh, yes. I just want to appreciate the good work you've done. It's been a wonderful 2.5-hour presentation, and it's not only useful to us as youth, but even for our students as a teacher. The English improvement strategies would help a lot in the field of teaching, both at the basic and the senior high school end. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Wisdom, for your kind words. I really appreciate them. So on that note, I would want to thank everybody, especially the Right Honorable Speaker, for inviting me to this seminar. At the beginning, I was quite anxious. I didn't know the kind of audience that I was going to make, and so I was pretty jittery in my preparations and all that. But I am so glad that I was able to make it here to share a few thoughts about the language with you all. I believe we've learned a thing or two that we are ready to imbibe and use in our everyday language use. So I thank the Youth Impact Parliament for inviting me for this August meeting, and I thank every participant for making time of our busy schedules with our internet bundles in the midst of these difficulties in the country. Spending about 2.5 hours online is not an easy task, but I do appreciate you for making time to listen to me. And I want to appreciate my beautiful wife who is online, who is cheering me up, Mrs. Betty Korankye, who is here, giving me all the morale to do this. So I really appreciate you, Mavis, Divine, Wisdom, Wise, Boniface. Thank you all for coming, and I'm hoping that if there is another opportunity in the foreseeable future to do this again, I'll be glad to honor this invitation. So thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, our guest speaker, for your closing remarks. Honorable members, I'll proceed to my closing remarks. Honorable members, fellow participants, on behalf of leadership and myself, I wish to convey the sincerest gratitude of the House to our guest speaker, Mr. Eric Nuamah Korankye. He is a sub-editor and writer at the Parliamentary Service of Ghana, and then he is also the writer of Before Breakfast Lessons. Thank you for coming to impact us with your mass experience and lecture us on today's topic. God bless you very much, sir, for availing yourself to impact us. I would also like to appreciate the efforts of members and participants in publicizing today's seminar and equally participating in it, most especially to our graphic designer, Mr. Dollar Gladstone, who is a youth MP and HUSRC Public Relations Officer. He wholeheartedly designed this poster, this beautiful poster you are seeing. Thank you very much. For the attention of the House and all participants, I hereby indulge you all to follow before breakfast lessons. The number is put on the screen. I'm very sure you saw it. Follow Mr. Eric Nuamah Korankye on Facebook and before breakfast lessons on Facebook and Telegram as well. There are more content for you. And as well, follow Youth Impacts Parliament on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Telegram, and YouTube. Youth Impacts Parliament is a youth organization recently established that creates opportunity for youths to be groomed in leadership roles, public speaking, parliamentary business, social norms, and values. We are still in our first parliamentary year. We have held a lot of sittings and virtual seminars. I indulge you all to follow us. Hopefully, we'll be having our 9th virtual leadership seminar with W.H. Kobina Adomaji London, who is a developer and a CEO of Tech Farm Hub. That seminar is scheduled for the 14th day of April, Thursday 14th, 2022, 6 p.m. on this same Google Meet platform. Youth Impacts Parliament is open for support from general public. All those who wish to support our vision can support us in kind or cash. You can as well contact me on 0201476896 and support us. As of now, membership is valid per participation in our sittings and seminars. We are hoping to introduce youth constituencies in the composition of our second parliament. Thank you. I'll move on to the vote of thanks. Honourable members, at this juncture, I'd like to use this opportunity to thank the Almighty God for making this program a success. My second thanks goes to our guest speaker, Mr. Eric Nuamah Korankye, and his beautiful wife, who is also online with us. Thank you very much, sir and madam, for facilitating today's program for us and taking delight in it. I also want to use this opportunity to thank all who are currently online and who have experienced the live session, and then all who will watch this program after we have uploaded it on YouTube and Facebook. Thank you all for joining us. On behalf of leadership and myself, I want to congratulate you for expanding your knowledge on today's topic and for availing yourself as well. God bless you all abundantly. We would like to now move on to our closing prayer. Let us pray. Almighty God, we humbly beseech thee to look with favor upon this Youth Impacts Parliament. Grant that it may perform its high duty as in thy sight. Give wisdom and understanding to all who have participated in this seminar, that they may proceed to implement whatever they have heard and learned, of which will result in personal development. We commit into your hands our 8th guest speaker, who has facilitated our virtual leadership seminar today, and all subsequent speakers and seminars, that they will also be successful. Bless the efforts of those who struggle to make this vision a living reality, inspire and strengthen our people, that they may give time, thought and sacrifice to speed the day of the coming beauty of this Youth Impacts Parliament, Volta region and Ghana. Amen. God bless you all and have a good night. I'm Jones Amegashie-Viglo, Speaker and Founder of Youth Impacts Parliament. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.